Hello. Hi everyone. Welcome to Guiding Voice podcast series. The Guiding Voice for a Better Future. This podcast is to help students and young professionals to shape their careers. Thank you for tuning in. This is Naveen and I'm with my co-host Sudhakar. Dear listeners, in this episode, we want to cover the topic of storytelling. Traditionally, for Indians, storytelling should come naturally as grandparents teach morals in the form of bedtime stories, and we are used to it since our childhood. Unfortunately, with the families becoming nuclear and independent, this skill now is being explicitly taught by professionals like Sinjini. And we are pleased to welcome Sinjini to our show today to have a conversation around storytelling and its benefits in both personal and professional world.
Sinjini Sengupta is an author, columnist, TED speaker, distinguished Toastmaster, and also is the founder of Lighthouse, a company that primarily specializes on storytelling, change management, and thought leadership. Sinjini is working towards a world that works for all. An alumna of Indian Statistical Institute ISI, Sinjini Sengupta is an erstwhile actuary and now an award-winning author, columnist, and professional speaker.
She is the author of the award-winning book ELIXIR, which was themed on womanhood and its alternate realities. And that book was made into a short film in Bengali, and it was also screened at prestigious 69th Cannes Film Festival in the year 2016.
As a keynote speaker and columnist, Sinjini focuses on the areas of conscious leadership, emotional wellness, gender sensitivity, and creative expressions in both written and spoken words. Sinjini is regularly invited to various national and international conferences, literary and film festivals, educational institutes, business schools, and corporate organizations to deliver keynotes, masterclasses, and conducting workshops. She is also a Vipassana meditator and a seeker. Sinjini, welcome again to the Guiding Voice podcast series. Happy to have you here.
Thank you so very much, Naveen and Sudhakar. I'm excited to be here and excited to take your stories. Thank you so much for that very elaborate and generous introduction.
So, Sinjini, let us understand the basics of storytelling. Like Naveen was mentioning earlier, we are used to hearing a lot of stories from our childhood. Can we talk a bit about the origin of storytelling and how that actually drives our personality?
Yes. Thank you for that question. That opens so much of possibilities. Perhaps that alone could be a full day session in itself. Origin of storytelling is a very interesting thing. I somehow believe, I think it's a pretty common assumption to make that storytelling came before languages. Mm-hmm. Because as we were kind of becoming human, through the stages of evolution, and we were trying to become gatherers and hunterers and kind of prey upon and find our food from the jungles and collect honey around the time maybe, and this is a bit of a imagination but also a bit of a conjecture, but I believe that the seed lies in truth. Mm-hmm. When human beings perhaps would have learned to light fire for the first time using stones and put firewood together in amber and kind of light it and gather around, they would perhaps communicate with each other and tell each other that so there is danger in that area, don't go there, and there is this new pot I have found honey in, and there is this. Much before language was invented, of course, we have archaeologists have found several pictures drawn on the walls of the caves, everything. So what is not a story? I mean, I would rather like to throw back the question in this fashion. What is not even a story? I mean, numbers tell a story, words tell a story, pictures tell a story, films tell a story, theaters tell a story, silence tells a story. Right? So what is not even a story? And that is dating back in time. if we date back in a person's life, again, stories start as early as a person perhaps is born or even unborn in the womb. They say that a baby can start to hear and observe and feel even when it's not out in the world. It knows its mother's voice, etc. When a child is born, the first expressions, the first bonding, the human need that needs to be met is physical touch, story, communication, much before the child learns to say its first word. And again, very, very small infants, the way we start telling stories to put them to sing, you put them to sleep, very first lullabies, and those are essentially words in a bit of a narration. It's in a bit of a story, and then making the child afraid. Don't go near fire, or go to sleep, or else some demon would come, or in the Indian culture, Gabbar Singh would come. Or even to tell them any story, like soon enough we put them into the trap of fairy tales. Now that is another political connotation altogether. The girls would be damsels in distress, waiting in tall towers with long hair and fair skin and looking pretty and doing nothing. And the boys would come, Princess Charming in horseback, and come to rescue the girls. A very political, gender, loaded stories of stereotypes. And then the stories about, even, the stories back from India, the folk tales, like one king and two queens. The queen, which was pretty, was actually jealous and bad, and the one who was epitome of sacrifice and always weeping. So pleasure is guilty and sacrifice is golden. Our morality starts right there. So stories are essential, stories are political. As humans evolved from agricultural age through industrial age, through knowledge, through, perhaps now we are knocking on the door of the age of wisdom, as they say. We are coming past those times. Early in my career, like I had a very long career of 12 years as an actuary. So, and actuaries, you might know, the work we do as actuaries is essentially talking to computers with numbers. And the most I wrote was bullet points on PowerPoints. So the leaders, the town halls and the annual reports and the targets, those would be typically etched in bar diagrams and pie charts, and we would be talking numbers all the time. And these are the company goals, these are the growth rates, so we will have a generous bonus when there will be projections, and when the time comes there would be a moderation on that. But those were largely in numbers and boxes and colors. We have consciously or unconsciously, out of a general, I would say, a consciousness shift has been there. We are now seeing that we don't need that, we need stories. Anything that sticks with people are stories. Stories stick and numbers kind of slip by. So even leadership is now speaking in a more evolved language of storytelling. Teams are built upon, like anything really, the green room conversations before a theater, before a cricket match, everything I believe is all those pep talks. Anything is really stories, imaginations. Go out there, do it, and what will you get if you do that? Language is essentially story, and now I feel that our profession and our personnel is wrapped in stories.
Absolutely. That's a great perspective, Sinjini. Even the womb concept that you mentioned from even epic Mahabharata, it was told that Abhimanyu learned the skill of getting into Padmavyuha when he was in the womb.
Absolutely, yes. Abhimanyu learned Chakravyuha from, and he did not know how to come out. This is actually an analogy I have used in my book, ELIXIR. Mahabharata, again, is one of my passion subjects. So I read and I talk about it a lot. So yes, I think it's a lot like life. We learn how to get in, but we don't always know how to kind of navigate it best and how to, find our way out of the various traps. Very good example. Thank you for that.
Excellent.
So, Sinjini, can we understand the impact of storytelling in professional world? Because right from parenting to boardrooms, everything that you mentioned, right, it is all about crafting stories and presenting ourselves. So what is the kind of impact that it is going to have?
Right. Storytelling in corporate world is slowly emerging as people are acknowledging the importance. Earlier, I would say that when I was in middle management to a little senior middle management around that time, I would see that apart from obviously departments which are like L&D, etc., there was no conscious emphasis on celebrating or acknowledging, rewarding language. So if there were like 5 members in the team, we would be kind of evaluated, or the managerial conversations would be around obviously work and delivery. We would say leadership skill and good communication, but we would not really talk about stories because it was there, but it was hidden. We did not spot it as one of the categories. However, if you think of it, effectiveness of a person always depended on their communication, or their way of recollecting something, being able to pitch in into a conversation and to be able to present their perspective and come out of it, etc. Stories are not always fictional. Stories are essentially non-fictions. And like at times when in the literary world, we often, the first question we ask is, are you writing a fiction or a non-fiction? Of course, books are separated by those two genres. But if you think of, I write fiction, my book is actually a literary fiction while I write a lot of non-fiction columns. And I see that how the two merge all the time together. Like when people really want to read a fiction, like imaginary characters, imaginary settings, it's one thing. But in our daily life, when I say something like, that other day this happened and I saw this, that too is a story. And that is what create relationships at workplaces. That is what create culture at workplaces. I mean, our conversations with colleagues, with our workplace, seniors, juniors, it's all stories. Especially, I would say storytelling comes very handy in company culture. When I look at this current situation of, the COVID-19 and lockdown, if I can talk about that in particular, we are slowly but quite surely seeing a consciousness around mental health. Till now, workplace, it was in a bit of denial. So I have also been when I was a very heavy duty job and I had major depressive disorder and anxiety, etc. There was at all no, awareness, and there was a lot of judgment. So I remember my, one over supervisor, he had once told me, so you are going to a psychiatrist, right? So that kind of a thing. If you are feeling anxious, you would have to call your manager and say, I have fever.
Yeah.
I think stories give acceptance, stories increase awareness, stories become a source of shifting company culture. Obviously case studies and all in the regular company training module, those are also a lot of storytelling, because we give case studies and we ask the employees how to navigate such situations. If I talk about my personal learning and delivering in stories, one thing is that when we tell stories in our head, those are often victim stories. Like, I know where everybody else did wrong to me and how I deserved better. When I wrote my first book, the biggest takeaway for me was to learn and understand perspectives. What does the other person think of it? So essentially, you have to head hop in stories. I feel in corporates and in workplaces, in leadership, if we learn to do the same thing, how is it perceived? How does the other person feel? It will open up a sense of empathy. If among colleagues also, like if I talk about gender sensitivity or otherness, or recently there are many ideas that are coming out. There has been 377 scraping by the Supreme Court. There has been hashtag #MeToo. There has been hashtag BLM. Take any big social event like that, and you would see that if only we have been preemptive, if only we have told stories that mainstreamed and included the other, and the other comes in, maybe caps and blocks. The other is very important, and stories help us embrace the other. If we can do that effectively at home, in our dinner table conversations, to workplaces, to lunch table colleague conversations, I feel that we can grow empathy, we can move to a emotionally safe workplace culture. Now workplaces operate, or till recent times, workplaces operated from a sense of fear psychosis. And there is a prospect of trying to develop the preemptive culture rather than being pulled up that you are assaulting somebody or you are kind of being discriminatory. Why don't we take that step first and we create a culture of inclusion through stories? We create a culture of diversity through stories. Why don't we mainstream the the literature with a default pronoun of she or they, where it is more inclusive to the variety and to the spectrum of gender? Why don't we put up stories in terms of the pictures on the wall or the pictures of marketing uses on billboards the businesses use? The typical picture of success is a man with tie and with a suitcase in hand. What if we put a woman on there? What if we put an expecting mother on the billboards where we pose a successful person's picture? Those are picture stories. I feel that businesses and society can learn a lot from telling, hearing, depicting, visualizing stories.
Great insights, Sinjini. I'm really curious now on where did this all start? What inspired you into this storytelling and these diversified skills like, literary world, writing, educational institutes, and of course the corporate engagements?
That's once more a very interesting place to go into. I have had a pretty sharp swerve, as they say, in career. So yeah, going back to my childhood, maybe like many of us, like many of you perhaps, I too was brought up on this typical great Indian myth, which is if you study hard, everything else will fall into place.
Yeah.
So you just study hard. That's all you have to do. So I studied hard and I went to the best institute, I would say. I mean, when it comes to my subject, I studied at Indian Statistical Institute. When I was in college, it was a dream come true to be able to crack admission there. Then I went on to get placed as an actuary and, I had a pretty quick, fast-paced career journey. And it has been all well on the outside. It also exposed the fallacy of the system to me quickly enough. Because if somewhere, I'm sure each one of us is creative. We are born creative. Education spoils us. I think in our generation, we are quite quick to realize that was an industrial model our parents grew up on. They had their own struggles, they had their own challenges, their own Maslow's curve, Maslow's triangle elevation level from where they operated. They taught us something and we blindfoldedly followed that path. Yet when you get disillusioned by that process, you quickly realize that there are many things that needs to be fixed. If I talk about my personal journey, I feel that there are a few aspects. Of course, we are all very complex human beings. We are all interdisciplinary in terms of academics or interests or curiosity. We are all intersectional as people. I'm a woman, but I'm privileged in terms of my maybe caste or religion in India. I'm economically, but I am maybe not so privileged when it comes to my gender or when it comes to few other factors. So it's a very laced lattice of identity. If I talk about my journey in the corporate, when I became a mother, I mean, obviously it's like there is a discriminatory factor from your very first breath. If I'm walking down the street, the number of boys that would kind of catcall at me and how a boy feels safe in the street is also very different starting from the time maybe when I was 5 years old. But when particularly I became a mother and in the journey towards it, when I fortunately not for very long, for just a few months, but a typical infertility treatments, etc., which are so common but so few people talk about it. So through all of that, I realized that there's a huge hypocrisy that we are living, perhaps. I mean, the difference in reality of a girl and a boy and how we are totally oblivious of it. I mean, we see it, it's like the elephant in the room. And when it starts to show up in your own life, you realize how drastic it is, and yet nobody talks about it. And when you are in that situation, you feel it's only happening to me and it's my fault. It's my shame, my guilt, my weight to carry, my cross to carry. And it's only after a lot of inner work, after a lot of journey, you realize that the personal is political. As a young mother and working in a job including commute hours would amount to 12-13 hours a day. So you wake up and with an interface with the US where it's more towards the evening. So when I would come back home at 12 in the night after finishing, and again, road safety means that if my job gets over at 10 o'clock in the night and I don't drive myself and, the roads aren't safe, so you wait for the company drop, which will convert a 15 minutes distance into a 1.5 hours. So all of these small factors, it may sound like these are petty things. Everyone works with it. So, what are you cribbing about? Go ahead with your life. Move on.
Mm-hmm.
But these small things pile up to make your reality and how you live your days, how you live your life. I used to come home at 12 in the night and not be able to sleep because of stress and everything else, guilt, whatever it is, internal, external hurdles. And in the morning, my daughter, who was like 2.5, 3 years old, maybe around the time I'm talking about, would get up in the morning and the nanny will wake her up and prepare her and see her off to school. I would just about get up in time to say hi. And she would be crying and she would go to school. And by the time she comes home, I would have left for work. And what is this life really? And work, I would have to pretend I don't have a baby at home. I would have to pretend I don't have a job. And what does it really do to you? And who are you? And what are the facets in your life? I mean, forget about self-time. You don't even have... It is very lopsided and we don't often talk about it until life happens to you. So those small realizations started to pile up and together, and finally, I guess it moves your ground, and when you ignore the messages for a very long time, your body starts to speak and it goes up to message. So that happened. Yeah, that happened. So finally it turned into a lot of, I would say it was a blessing in disguise, and it was perhaps adversities at times a kind of a wake-up call. When I woke up, it almost was an emotional rebirth, because I felt that there were so many things that I wouldn't have noticed if it didn't happen to me. And so many people go through it. And the only way we go through it is by absorbing all that is wrong, not with us, but with the world. And somebody needs to start talking. Many people are doing that talking. I'm very well aware, and I'm deeply grateful for all the people who came before me and did that, so that I could be here talking to you today, for example. But there's so much left to be done, and we all have to do it.
So all your real life experiences have inspired you to get into this storytelling. So this is an amazing backdrop. And now let's talk a little bit about your book, the award-winning book ELIXIR, which was also made into a short film in Bengali. So did you imagine that your book will inspire someone to make a movie and also get featured at the prestigious Cannes Film Festival? And I mean, has this been your passion since childhood, or has it just come out of your experience?
Okay. So ELIXIR had its own story. I mean, ELIXIR's story is so fascinating that at times I have to pinch myself to believe it myself. Whether it came from childhood, if somebody asks me to close my eyes and go back to my childhood, I think the picture I see is that, I had my corner in my room. I had the privilege of having my own room. Like Virginia Woolf says, a room of your own for girls. So I always had my own room. And I would typically, be seen sitting with some kind of a textbook, history, geography or physics, and if you look carefully inside that, there would be tucked in a storybook or a novel that I would be secretly reading, while my parents, when they passed by, they would see the textbook. So I have always been an ardent reader. I never thought anything can come out of it. I always thought that career is career, and obviously reading is reading. So that is my backdrop of loving stories from my childhood. Since I stepped out of home and went to my first job in Bombay, then to Bangalore, then shifted to Gurgaon, there were hardly one or two favorite books that I always carried with me, even if I was living life in a suitcase. Now I'm very proud to say, and since we are doing a podcast, you cannot see it, but I have one room which is a library, and I have several books. I'm very proud of it. It's my happy corner.
We would love to see that, actually.
Yeah, it's my happy corner. I'm so proud of it. It's like, really, if I feel bad, I just step into this space and I remember how many books are left to read, and I'm kind of back in life. Growing up, and totally literature was totally gone from my life when I got absorbed into my career, especially because as an actuary, you have to come home and study and crack difficult exams, and the passing rates are at times 1% or 2%, or even there were times when 36 people appeared for an exam and 0 passed. So that's a very usual scene. So having to pass 14 exams of various difficulty levels, I really did not have much time for literature left in my life for a very long time. At least for about a decade at least. And then again, life happened. So this is a very clear one-day incident. One day I was coming back from work to home. It was 11 in the night. I was sitting in my office cab waiting for the drop home. I don't know what happened that day, and a very sudden idea came to me. And on any other day, I would just let it pass. I really don't know what happened that day, that I pulled out the BlackBerry from my handbag and I started to punch in that story. I just wrote, almost like in a trance. I don't know how that, that journey of 1.5 hours passed as the cab went around in my city and dropped me last. By the end of it, I had a story written out. My blog was just about a month old or something like that. Around that time, I published the story in my blog. My husband, again, he is a banker. He works in Barclays and he has been in theatres ever since. He has directed, plays and theatre, written it and directed it ever since he was like himself in class 7 or something.
Wow.
And we have also done theatres when we were in Bangalore, when we were in Gurgaon. So in Alliance Strasse, we had our show in Bangalore, also in Rangashankara. So he has always been in theatres, and the common peeve is that all our friends, close to the date of the show, one or the other would get admission in a B school or change job and relocate. So it's not easy to actually, find time and get all people together and conduct a theatre production. So he has been doing that with a great tenacity for a very long time until he could. So when he read that story, and the story was very, very similar. So I'll come to that a little while later. So when he read that story, his first instinct was that, I want to make it into a short film. And I was like, are you mad? Because it was around the time when I was falling sick and the doctor had given an ultimatum that if you don't take a career break now, you won't really survive this. You would be in bed for the rest of your life or something.
Wow.
I was a step away from quadriplegia actually. So I was very, very ill. So I had just put in my paper and I was like, are you mad? But he actually stuck to that. We crowdfunded. So one friend gave 2,000 rupees, one friend gave $50, another gave 5,000. And then we broke a few fixed deposits and we actually took that very crazy step of writing the script together. The two of us fought like tooth and nail. Obviously my story, his vision. So you can imagine the fireworks at home. So all of that happened and we finally, he went out and made the film. 35 minutes long in Bengali with subtitles, of course, and then he sent it out to a few festivals. And around that time, I put in my paper, and I was mostly on bed rest. And then one day there was this email in our mailbox saying Monsieur and that your film has been selected to be screened at the Short Film Corner at the 69th Cannes Film Festival. And it was, really to pinch ourselves awake moment. So that happened. The film actually got, several awards internationally. It got Best Film at Boston Kaleidoscope and a number of, Best Screenplay Award from 575 international films at one of the other film festivals. All of those things happened and a number of screening happened in various cities in India. So we also walked the red carpet at Cannes and it was like really mind-blowing. At one of the screenings in Gurgaon, this gentleman at the end of the screening, we were just standing there answering questions from the audience, and this gentleman came and gave me his visiting card and said that I'm a publisher of the publishing house called Ridomania. His name is Dipankar Mukherjee. So he said that this belongs to a book and I would like to sign you. I was like, is this a hoax? Because I knew that I never in my dream did I think that. I mean, I grew up on stories where J.K. Rowling got rejected 12 times before Harry Potter saw the light of the day, right? I actually had the privilege of signing my first book contract before I wrote the first word of the manuscript. So it's a story so difficult to believe. I find it hard to believe at times. So then over the next 1 year, around that time, I was actually freelancing and writing columns with a number of publications, Huffington Post and a number of publications, good publications on various things such as, things close to my heart, like women at workplaces, etc. So then I stopped everything and started to write this book, and the book got, the film was screened in 2016 and the book came out and got published in 2017. I was very, very fortunate with the love it gathered because I had zero connections in the world of journalism, and this is a pretty closed circle. The literary circle is pretty closed and small, and people know each other. They come from shared journalism background, or they would have studied English, etc. So I was a very newbie. The publishing house is also relatively small and new, and I was very clear on my values that obviously I am an old school author, so I don't believe in spending at all on marketing. So I am very much like, the book has its own life. I have my own life. I'm not going to do a paid marketing. I was so touched when the book was picked up. In fact, much after its release, I would say. It was a very organic pickup. I got interviewed by the Hindu. The book was, featured and reviewed in almost every mainstream, like Hindustan Times to Statesman to Asian. It's every single, I would say, it was. And then it got shortlisted among the 5 best fictions of 2017 at Gurgaon Lit Fest in 2018. So it was a huge break, and it was really, I had been very, very scared because the film already had achieved so much. It was a risk to write a book on it again and to be told that the book is nowhere close to the film. But frankly, it did live up to my dignity. I would say it saved my face. And the book had its own story to tell. And it has been a very lovely journey. It kind of changed the way I saw myself, because I never knew I could make a career all separate from my actuarial identity. And now I think I have to remind people that I had once been an actuary. So, yeah.
That's quite inspiring, Sinjini. So with all these exciting and demanding engagements, how do you manage your time? Like, do you have some patented cloning technique kind of thing? And we are really curious to learn some tips from you. And I'm sure it will also benefit our audience.
Thank you so much. I at times really amaze myself, because I always think of the time when I could not even pull myself out of the bed to go answer the doorbell. I was so, so down, and it's a lot of inner work. It's not that I do something superhuman, and I don't at all believe in the theory of, superwoman stories. And I really hate it, and I feel that it's politically motivated when people ask women, how do you manage, when they don't ask men, etc. But having said that, yes, I have surprised myself with my productivity lately, because I did not imagine I could do quite a few things together. I think I am spreading myself a little thin, and I'm taking a little bit of chance on myself. I should rest up a bit as well. But when you find your passion, it doesn't feel like work. I am so driven by the work I'm doing, and I feel so strongly that there's a need for this work. It may sound a little like a pep talk or something, but the work I'm doing now and the way I feel right now, it's really a textbook material. Like they say, ikigai is a concept I'm sure many of you would have heard already.
Yeah.
Where what you can do, what skills you have, and what you love to do, and what the world needs and what the world will pay you for. When the four of that meet, it's quite magic. Frankly, I have trained myself very hard. What I love to do, I discovered very late. That I love to talk and I love to write, because my profession was very different from it before that. I trained myself over the last 6 years. I cannot list the number of courses I did in positive psychology, in self-determination theory, how motivation works. I am a Vipassana meditator. So, how spirituality and psychology and philosophy, and also hard analytics, like how critical thinking and creative thinking come together. Because whatever you do, art or craft or whatever you do, essentially it requires both creative and critical thinking. So to marry the two sides, and I have been a public speaker very ardently. So I have been a Toastmaster for 5 years now. I completed my DTM. So the DTM plaque came just yesterday. So I have had the opportunity again. Motivation is very important. Even if we say that intrinsic motivation is what you need, but at times you do need some extrinsic motivation. I've been very fortunate. I have been invited on TEDx twice, and I spoke on subjects very close to my heart. I spoke on gender neutral parenting on my first TEDx, and on the second one I spoke about growing up workplaces ready for women. So long we prepared girls for the workplaces, now we need to grow workplaces ready for the women. And I do get invited to places where it matters and where it influences. Like I was very fortunate to be invited to speak at the 8th National HR Conference on glass ceilings, and to the to many industry leaders, and also to the batch of outgoing XLRI students who will form the future HR. And how interesting and exciting can it be to talk to people who would actually go out and create company policies. So my exhaustion is really so secondary or tertiary to that scheme of. So I'm very kicked about the work I'm doing, and I do feel that it will somewhere, I don't know how and when and exactly how, but I do trust that it will matter. And it's not important who is doing it, I am doing it or you are doing it. What matters is things should change for the better. It's high time.
Absolutely, Sinjini. Thank you very much for your valuable time and amazing thoughts. It was indeed a great conversation on this special topic on storytelling. And your passion shows in the variety of great stuff that you are doing, starting from your academic engagements to corporate engagements to your book writing to TEDx talks to the topmost activity which I really liked about improving the society to ensure that we are not gender biased. Thank you very much. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so very much. It's my honor and my pleasure, and it was a lovely session. I really loved talking to you, and the stories and the questions you asked me were very relevant and gave me a lot of space to cover. I just want to mention that I am again starting. I took the leap finally to start Lighthouse, which is again by bringing all my passion together under one umbrella. The tagline of Lighthouse is storytelling, change making, and thought leadership. I am hoping to be able to teach skills to tell our stories better, self-awareness, and to write our stories better through creative writing, to tell our stories better through effective and communication and powerful storytelling from the stage, and to also be able to creatively explore inside and find those jewels inside us that's always there, only we kind of lose sight of them, and then change make through such conversations like the one we are just having right now. Thought leadership, where we talk about various players in the ecosystem and bring them together for a 360-degree solution, because at times we try to solve things in vacuum. When we talk about workplace problems, we solve it within the workplace, whereas we don't talk about childcare, we don't talk about schools, we don't talk about education system. So we have to have a 360-degree angle, and I'm trying to contribute in my own small way. So starting 2nd September, which is perhaps going to be after by the time this podcast comes out, and I think the course would have rolled out already. I'm rolling out the first intensive program, a 20-hour program in powerful storytelling, where I will teach a class. I'm inviting registrations for that, where I'll teach art and craft of storytelling, how to find the stories, how to own up your stories, how to put power and punch into your stories, how to speak with authority and authenticity and courage, how to modulate voice, how to use your body, hand, eyes, face, gestures, and how to create a legacy through your stories. So I'm looking very excitedly forward to that first program from Lighthouse, and I do hope that I will be rolling out a lot of programs like that in collaboration with people, because I do believe that collaboration is the way forward. I mean, we are not really here to contest against each other. I mean, when intentions are together, we should kind of pull our forces together and do it together. So I'm really looking forward to a lot of excitement going forward with Lighthouse.
Yep, definitely, Sinjini. We are going to publish the details of Lighthouse in this episode description. We also look forward for further collaboration with you in terms of future episodes, or where we can contribute to Lighthouse as well. So thank you again for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Dear listeners, to know more about our speaker and the content, visit or follow us on social media, or feel free to email us, and we will be happy to share further details with you.
All right. So it brings us to the trivia segment of today's episode. And today's trivia is about innovation and money spent. Did you ever think that there is a correlation between innovation and money spent? According to 2017 report by PricewaterhouseCoopers, annual Global Innovation 1000 report, they found that there is no statistical evidence to prove a correlation between money spent on research and development and financial performance. So the logical conclusion would be that it is how you spend the money rather than how much you spend that is important. Also, a huge percentage of business executives, like to be precise, it's about 93% of them, think that innovation driven by organic growth will increase their revenue. Interesting, isn't it? Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful time. Take care and be safe.